Thank you, Danius. That's a great selection of music to tie into my presentation on value. Hopefully that song sounded familiar. Money Talks. It was used at a huge conference like this in Australia once, and it kind of really sets the message. So I spent 20 years in business-to-business environment with a company called SKF, a large Swedish global company, industrial products. And I started with them in Canada, and over the years we started to notice something in the marketplace. And I see it happening everywhere in the world. The rise of the procurement people, the rise of the economic buyer. These people versus the technical buyer, of course you need them, but procurement people seem to have a lot more authority and weight in business decisions. And as a company, we spent a lot of money creating great products and services, but if we couldn't get our customers to pay for it, it was kind of worthless. So this, I believe, was the first global vice president of value job ever created. Numerous other companies are different titles maybe, but are starting to follow this. To pull that stuff together so that you can have a better discussion with your key customers about what value you bring and not about lowest price. I'm now doing the consulting world, and my presentation will cover a lot of best examples from this book you see on the right. It was published about a year ago, but I think it's got two interesting points right off the top. The title, Value First, Then Price. The order in which you have a discussion with customers is very important. Start with what do you do to help them be more profitable? And I'll talk to you how to measure that and some other things. But we also, within the book, were able to get numerous procurement people to say, how do I want to engage with suppliers, sellers? What do I care about? How do I think? So I'm going to walk you through that journey and show you some of the things that we did to kind of try to enable that different discussion. And just to give you an example, there's, it's a multi-billion-dollar market, 50 billion, 100 billion, and SKF was the higher price player, 10, 20, 50%. So, but we were also the biggest. So how can you be the biggest in a marketplace when you're the highest price and you've got these competitors? So we had to really focus on what is our value that we can deliver differently. So I believe there's 4 stages to the journey. It starts with creating something that's of value. So your product development process really needs to be focused on what problem are we solving for a customer? How is this better than the alternatives? The next stage is to calculate it or quantify that value. Taking numbers or ranges of impact, saying, we think if we do this, this is the financial impact it will have for you. Next, communicating that to the marketplace. Don't buy this type of product or service based on price, buy it on best value. So that procurement people can start to think differently. Everything is not a commodity. And finally, you need to get paid for the value you create. You see a term at the very top of the slide called total profit added. That's an evolution of a concept called total cost of ownership. The problem with total cost of ownership, and I'll get more specific, is it only focuses on how you affect the customer's cost. But companies are in business to be profitable. So how can you help them increase their value and reduce their cost, expanding their profit? So with that, if we can get the video ready to run, I'll explain to you quickly. You're going to see my retired CEO at a global conference for our 100-year anniversary. He's presenting to a room like this of customers and distributors. So if we could run the video quickly. Let's go stand here.
One of the big challenges we have together is to ensure our customers understand that price does not equal cost. Only focusing on price is a loser's game. We lose, you lose, our customers lose.
There's a lot of emphasis on growth. There's a demand for profitability. You're not going to accomplish that through selling price.
What firms do when they're at their very best is create new value, better alternatives for doing things, better, newer solutions. But really understanding and quantifying what does that mean economically to their customers. How can I market that better? How can I keep my fair share? How can I create even more value for our customer?
If we just keep with this arm's length transaction focusing on price, we never are able to identify and eliminate these value drains and value leaks, which can account for far more in terms of improving our profitability as a supplier and our customers' profitability than we'll ever be able to do by trying to focus on trying to get a 10% price cut, for example.
So the job of the salesperson is to add to the product, to create value, no longer to say we have a better mousetrap, but to show the customer how to place the mousetrap, to catch most mice, to show them what kind of bait in the mousetrap mice will like best, to find ways to solve customer problems.
You really need to have a compelling value proposition that is not only compelling to your own internal engineering technology people, but far more important to the people who are not experts in your technology, who are not experts in engineering, and yet they're the decision makers. The power of so what.
At the end of the day, if you can't show the value you deliver, and remember the judge of the value you deliver is the customer. If you can't show and prove the value you deliver, then you're just delivering on price. You're just selling on price. So it's a very important part of how we are developing our business is to be able to capture value, create value, and get paid for that value from our customers.
Kind of a funny accent for a Swedish CEO. He is Scottish, which I've been told by him is different than being English. But I think there's some really interesting points in that to go into our discussion about value. So I spend a lot of time making sure that people are using the right term. People have a tendency to transpose the word price and cost. They're two completely different concepts. Price is what you pay for something, 100 euros. Cost includes price, the 100 euros plus the taxes, the shipping costs, the receiving cost, the operating cost, the energy, all these other things. And when customers say, I want a lower price, I usually come back and say, why? Well, we need to be more profitable. Well, then we should be looking at cost savings, not price savings. Talk to any financial person, and they can guarantee a cost savings makes a company more profitable. A price savings does not. And I do a lot of work at procurement universities, et cetera, and they'll even admit, when they come to salespeople sometimes and say, we need a cost reduction, that salespeople respond with a price reduction. So just stop and take a look at those two words. Value's on the upside, but cost, I can be the highest priced person in the marketplace, but I'm going to deliver the lowest cost to you. Kind of an evolution of total cost of ownership. There's this look called total profit added. The model I'm going to show you is in the industrial marketplace. So people that make paper or steel or something, but it's applicable to numerous different types of marketplaces. So I'll give you some examples. It starts with an OEM, somebody that takes a bunch of parts and makes something. Caterpillar as an example, or John Deere, or General Motors. They take a bunch of parts and make a machine. And they're being told by the marketplace, what does the customer want? I won't spend much time on the OEM part, but they build it, then somebody's going to buy it. And at SKF, Tom, who you saw there, saw me on stage once and said to me, our procurement team talks about buying on best value, total cost of ownership, but the savings that they keep showing me never seem to get to my bottom line. So I want you to go work with our procurement team. And the professional procurement chairperson, Bo Inga, he was in charge of buying $6 billion, or euros, of things to help our factories run. And he said, Todd, we already do this. Why does Tom, the CEO, telling you as a salesperson to come teach me how to buy? And I said, not a problem, just tell me what we measure. And in general, what Bo Inga was measuring is price and associated costs. So the price of the widget, the machine, the shipping cost of the machine, the taxation of the machine, the currency cost, to hedge maybe, and like-minded things. And this is important, but that's total cost of acquisition, which is not total cost of ownership. So if a customer says, we buy in total cost of ownership because they've read the books, that's great. What do you measure? Now that means you might have to do some homework at your company to see how you can affect their total cost, because once somebody builds it, The procurement team has bought it. Now what happens? It gets installed, operated, and maintained. Well, how much energy will this machine use? How much water will it use? How much lubricant will it use? You'll see that the underlined words, can I help my customer increase their production, their yield, their quality? So during the phase of usage, there's all these other costs and benefits. And finally, you have disposal. In a lot of marketplaces, you just throw something away. What I started to learn is sometimes disposal actually is the biggest cost. For lubricant, it's sometimes twice the price of buying the lubricant is to dispose of it. So, a few examples here. Say you were to buy a car. Should you look at the initial purchase price of the car? It's interesting, but that's my acquisition. What's it going to cost me to operate this? So, kilometers per liter calculation. What are the maintenance costs for this type of car? There's a lot of data you can get around that. But what really matters when you have a car is the disposal cost. In this case, it's a positive. You, at 5 years, decide to resell the car for whatever reason. It's the difference between what you bought it for and what you sold it for, divided over the period of time with all the costs associated with it. So Mercedes does a lot of research that shows their higher priced car is actually less per month because it depreciates slower. So I'm seeing this methodology and mindset occurring in the medical industry. Hospitals, governments can't afford to be spending more money. They have to find a way to make what they've got be better. So I don't mind buying your prescription or your medicine, but how's it going to help me have a lower cost for that patient over the life? In the renewable energy world, solar, wind, it's called levelized cost of energy. So you're seeing it more and more in the business-to-business marketplace. I'll show you some consumer examples in a minute. So the question is, where are the numbers? It's amazing what you can find doing some research. So Accenture did a piece of research 13, 14 years ago, but it still holds true. They looked at commercial aircraft. Class 8 trucks are Scania, Volvo, the big trucks that move things. They looked at industrial equipment, fans, gearboxes, pumps, and they also looked at light-duty pickup trucks used for work. And as you can see, the red bar is the initial price. It's 8 to 12%. 80 to 90% of its cost in use. And what I find is a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll spend all their time looking at that 12%. That's not the number you should be looking at. You should be looking at the 88%. So one example I use with the customers, making numbers up here. Yes, we're 10% more expensive, but to run the machine, we at least 2% less. Less energy, less downtime, less repairs, whatever those things are. And the comment I sometimes get from people is, well, 10% is better than 2%. Remember, you always need the denominator to do the calculation. 10% of 12 is 1.2%. 2% of that big 88 is 1.76. That 2% is actually 50% bigger than that 10%. There's a lot of data in the marketplace to have these discussions. You could run your own tests, but I'm amazed how many things exist out in the marketplace to have that discussion. A good colleague, a friend of mine, a gentleman named Rob McGuire, he's a professional procurement person. He ran Bain's Consulting Group in Europe for procurement. He worked at Black & Decker, a bunch of places, but him and me have built a great relationship just trying to learn, what does procurement think? So Rob put this together for one of our sessions. And I don't know the data well enough, but I guess when discrete semiconductors, price is a very high component of the total cost. But as you move to the right, you can see office supplies, but on the far right, photocopiers. And I don't care if you're on the buy side or the sell side. It's a simple example, but I could make fun of SKF because they're like everybody else. We decided to standardize on our photocopiers. So we looked at our needs for people that work from home and said we need to be able to do black and white and color. They can scan and do certain things. And we were given 3 bids. I don't remember the prices, but let's say $200, $250, and $300. And of course, as a procurement organization, they bought the lowest price that met the minimum criteria. Nobody wanted to look at the ink cost. And the question I have, what's better, $49 ink or $40 ink? And the usual response I get is, well, 40 is cheaper than 49. Maybe the $49 ink produces more pages. So if I was in charge of selling photocopiers or buying them, I'd want the average cost to print a page. So I have to make some assumptions, but that should be the number I'm looking at. So procurement, the evolution of procurement. This lady is great. We did a conference in the UK. She's from the drug industry, and you all can read, but I will say it because it's so impactful. Suppliers, us salespeople, don't come to us with a business case. It's what we want. It's what we need as procurement. To sell your value to my company, you better get some numbers that make sense to me so that I can justify not buying in the lowest price. And my favorite part is the last comment. If you can't quantify your value, don't be surprised at procurement failure to do so. They've got to buy a bunch of different things. They're not going to sit there and do all the analysis of why they should pay you more money. But walking in with a business case is a great way to start a meeting. We think by you working with us, we could save you $1 million over 3 years in less energy, less this, less this. I've got your attention probably. So my background, you can see the logo there from the SKF tool that I built 20 years ago. 20 years ago there wasn't software, but now there is. But I wanted to show you that it's, there's other companies doing this now. It's part of my new job. But Caterpillar, Rolls-Royce, who created Power by the Hour 56 years ago or something. General Electric, Nalco, which is a water filtration company, Ericsson, Abbott's in the medical world, and Tetra Pak. I got plenty more examples, but just to give you a feeling that it's not just industrial. And it's not just an ROI calculator. When I left SKF, we had 110,000 cases built in the system. I could have a very intelligent conversation with any customer in the world. I could walk in and say, this is what we've done for your company around the world. This is what I've done in your industry. I think it was the total savings we had generated was $7 billion or euros. So it became a core part of what we did. The next slide I want to go through, I think is really, really interesting. My procurement friend drew this one day, and he goes, this is how people buy. I said, well, maybe we should figure out how people buy. So you as a person, or company, but a person, a need gets identified. You're at home one day and you realize you need to buy a new car. For whatever reason, you got to buy a car. Okay, so I've got a need, I need to buy a car. And then you probably say, you're sitting at home and you say, what type of car do I want? I don't want electric. I'm not saying these are rational, but I don't want electric, and I don't want a sports car, and I want a family car. So you make some specifications. And then you look at that and you say, who possibly could supply that? Who's a company that I've got a relationship, a history with that I like? So Volkswagen might be one, and Volvo, and Ford, whatever. You've made a decision. These are the companies you want to go see or look at. In the business world, this is when they send out the RFP, the RFI, to you guys, and you respond back with all your information. Then they choose one person to negotiate with or two. Then they award the contract. So I know I'm mixing between business to business buying and personal buying, but hopefully you see that the process is the same. But the most important part of this slide is Rob's point that the ability for you to have a value discussion with the customer dramatically declines over time. If you're meeting that customer for the first time in the RFP or RFI stage, it's too late to have a value discussion. They've already decided what they're going to buy, what they're going to measure. And I find a lot of people, that's where the sales process begins. A lot of research, interesting statistic from the Challenger Group, something to the effect of, in business procurement, 68 or 70% of the buying decision has been made before they even call you to say, I'm interested in buying a photocopier. So it's pretty tough to change somebody's mind. I said I'd put some stuff in here on consumer calculations. Not the candy bars or something like that, but this is General Electric trying to show you how much money you can save by upgrading to these efficient light bulbs that exist. This is one, I'll tell you kind of a funny story. This is British Air trying to fight back against the low price carriers in the marketplace. And you can see here, they've tried to put some numbers associated with, the price of the ticket. But a funny story where I learned this very personally, I used to spend a lot of time in downtown London, where London Business School is. And sometimes when I was finished there, I would jump on a plane and go to Paris. And like most of us, we get our routines. So we'd finish the session, my colleague and me would have a beer maybe, and then there's a train called the Heathrow Express. It leaves every 15 minutes and takes 15 minutes to get to Heathrow. So I knew I could always get to the airport in 30 minutes, no matter what. No traffic problems. And so we come out the one day, and they go, yeah, what time's my flight at? And I go, what's that? I'm going to Gatwick? Where's Gatwick? And Rob goes, yeah, it's at the other London airport. I said, okay, how do I get there? Well, you could take a train and then jump on a bus, then take it, No, he goes, we're going to put you in a black cab. And back in those days, the black cabs didn't take credit cards. So I think it was around 60 or 70 pounds he gave the driver to get me to Gatwick. So get to Gatwick, go to check in, and of course, they charged me fees to check my bag and all these other fees. Then I get on the airplane and go, okay, shut my eyes for a few minutes, it seems. We land in Paris, and my normal Paris routine was take the train in the station at Charles de Gaulle, take it into town, because fighting French traffic or Paris traffic is horrendous at rush hour. So that was my plan. I wake up, and the English gentleman is saying, and welcome to Paris. And I look out the window and I go, this is not Charles de Gaulle. I mean, it's not a great airport, but I know what it looks like. And I asked my neighbor, he says, no, we're at Orly. Where's Orly? Oh, it's the other airport. Well, there's no train at Orly to get me downtown, so I had to take a taxi and then continue on. It's the total cost for me to leave where I am to get where I'm going that I should have looked at. That's the calculation. So kind of a summation of some statistics that you're free to use. The first one there is from a North American organization, but it comprises 500 or 600 big industrial companies. And they asked the procurement people from all these companies, do you have a structured methodology to buy on best value? Total profit added. And they all responded, and companies that have a structured way to buy on best value, if you remember that 4-stage slide as an example, were 35% more profitable than companies that didn't. So, Mr. Procurement people, the real money is buying the right way. I won't go through each one of these, but again, if you happen to, I'm sorry, I'm getting behind on myself here. The second one is that orange-colored book. It's based on research from the Nobel Economic Prize from 2009. You don't win a Nobel Economic Prize unless you've got a lot of research and facts to back up the point. And then there's a bunch of professors that wrote things for the book that I mentioned earlier, saying this is the right way to move forward. So, there is data to challenge procurement people. Why are we having a price discussion? But it's our job to bring the value information. So pricing. Let's think of how do we get paid for value. You need to know your cost, but that shouldn't be how you start. That should be the last check. What's the value for the customer? And the price has to be less than that. So let's just go through some neat little concepts here. When things go on sale here, let's just say, for example, toilet paper goes on sale. The question is, how much more toilet paper will be used in Lithuania if it goes on sale? The total consumption during the year won't change. People will probably just stock up on it. They go to these Aldi or Sam's Club, wherever they go. So the consumption won't change. All you're doing is moving the timing of the buy. So really think, I was talking to a company, just as an example, say the prices of cell phones, mobile phones, came down by $100. How many more mobile phones would be used in Lithuania? Probably not very many. You're not going to take your $800 phone and smash it, because you can now get another one for $700. So always stop and ask yourself, and I'm looking at the whole market, not how much business you get versus your competitor, but how much business will you get if you drop your price? People just have a tendency to hoard. Secondly, this is kind of counterintuitive, at least to me. A lot of times, at least in industry, I saw that we gave customers a lot of choice. It turns out you should give customers choice, but not too much. It's the famous, what's called the JAM study, but a Swedish professor, I believe, and they went to one of these marketplaces, and they said, we built a huge display of all the different variations of jam. And people they get very attracted. It's very interesting to go look at this huge display. But the number of people that bought jam was very low. They got confused. Buyer's remorse could start setting in. So they just say, no decision. Why would I make a decision when I could be wrong? Then she redid the same study with much fewer choices. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but a lot more people bought. Give your customers choice, but limit the choice and make sure it's clear and concise what the different options have. At least my experience and my clients, sometimes I see you confuse the customer with all these different options. This is from business to consumer world, but I know it's applicable to business. So it's something called the compromise effect. So tonight you're going to go out for dinner with your wife or your friends or whatever, and you're going to look at the menu, and there's going to be 2 bottles of wine. There's a $10 one and a $30 one, 3 times the price. Do we really need to spend that much more money? The $10 one can't be that bad. It's good enough. And you find that people usually split 50-50. Half the people would buy the 30 and half the people would buy the 10, justifying it in their own mind. If you add a third option, it's called the Decoy. Now if I added a $50 bottle, what most people will buy is the $30 one. They'll look at it and say, we don't need 50, 30 will be good enough, that's reasonable. And there's a lot of statistics behind this, but again, instead of trying to create a cheaper version, which I know a lot of companies are trying to do, build a better version. If you ever notice when you go car shopping, it's the nicest car that's in the showroom with all the bells and whistles on it. They anchor you at a high thing, and then they say, okay, you can option around that. So the next question is, do you have contracting ways to contract for value? So in my old life, SKF, we had one which was a full outsourced agreement. How much do you spend, Mr. Customer, doing this process? $100 million. We'll do it for $90 million, but if we have other benefits, other KPIs, we get part of that value. Reduction in downtime or energy or something. The one on the right is more of a simplistic one. Yes, we're going to be a higher price, Mr. Customer, but we're going to guarantee that we'll find you value worth 10% per year. So I've signed 171 of those around the world. And you're talking publicly traded company, but a 10% price reduction is about 90% of the profit of the company. The average company, if they have a 10% net and you cut the price by 5%, that's 50% of the profit gone. A lot of salespeople like to talk about gross margins. That's interesting, but price comes off the net. So you have to agree what's the value and have a process, but this is my favorite comment from Tom. He goes, Todd, I can't even count how many ways our salespeople have come up with to cut a price. It's a competitive situation. It was a large order. As salespeople, why do we have all these processes to cut price and not have a process to guarantee value? So if you have a process to cut a price for a customer for whatever reason, you should have a process to guarantee the value and not cut the price. I'm sorry. So some final thoughts here. What's it worth for you? I showed you what the value for procurement was, but a big study done by Monitor Deloitte Global Group, companies that take the value approach, have a tool, have a strategy, etc., are 24% more profitable than their competitors in the same industry. 24%. Even taking the value approach and not being good at it, companies were 6% more profitable. It'll reduce your discounting, it'll speed up the sales cycle, your customers will be happier. Out of all those 170 agreements I mentioned earlier, we never lost one ongoing. We re-engaged how we dealt with our clients. So, I think, right here that, there's been a lot of research that I've done and worked with, but, companies that do this are more profitable. So, IMD, Harvard, again, they teach this case around value. The second column is the procurement associations. So, the U.S. government, National Institute of Government Purchasing, the one in Asia, 5 of them, and I'm not saying anything's going to happen with it, but I had a chance to meet some people from ministry in town this week and have a discussion about buying best value and really starting to have a better process of what is value. So you can see that there's some pretty big name people here thinking of changing the way they value things. And the final point here is, if you're going to drive a culture change towards value, the book's all about it, but You have to equip the sales team with better value products, having some training, having some tools. Your compensation system, is it driving a volume behavior or a profit behavior? I mean, if not cutting a price is going to take more work, the sales force should get compensated when they do that right. And then really driving the culture change in the marketplace so that customers think differently. Maybe I should think differently when I buy whatever that is. So, price is only ever an issue in the absence of value. I believe that value needs to be quantified using the customer's metrics. The book's got a bunch of examples in it. And if anybody wants to chat, I'm going to stick around for the next little bit. And I've got a colleague that I do a lot of work with here, Modestus, and he can give you more specifics on how it applies to the Lithuanian marketplace. It's a global concept. I've been to China, I've been to everywhere. Value is what's important. Make sure you sell the value and create the value, and then get paid for it. Thank you for your time.